And it is time for Overreaction Monday with my main man, Jeff Ketch. Ketch, you and I have been doing shows for a while, and we'll talk about Rogue Shop in a second. And Ketch, I can't tell you how many shows that you and I have done. And you and I have worked together for darn near 10 years. And this is a first for you and I. You and I have never come in here on a Monday with a Texas team that's 4-0.
That's so sad.
I don't know.
That's so sad. Like, I know you want it to be uplifting and that everybody, like, just saying it out loud though is sad.
But it's also good because
it's better than the alternative.
Well, yes, which has been our life beforehand. And so, of course, obviously, before we get the show started, Catch, it is Rogue Shop time. You want to tell them about the sponsor?
I can. It is Texas's home for legal CBD, THC, and so much more. You can see that right on the banner above my head. Go to rogueshop.com. Use that promo code OrangeBloods. They got a little bit of everything for everybody, depending on what it is that you need. You can get your cartridges. Yes, you can. You can get your salves. You can for your aching bones and your body. It'll help you sleep at night. The gummies. Like I said, a little bit of everything. Just go to the website, rogueshop.com. Just do some shopping. See what you like. Ask people on Orange Bloods what they like. I promise you it will improve the quality of your life. Anwar might still be married had he found Rogue Shop.
Yes.
Just a couple of years earlier. Like, he might still be married. He might have never even got divorced the first time.
Now, the first one, I think Rogue could have helped me with the first marriage because it would have calmed me down. Because it would have calmed me down because when she would have just been saying certain things, I would just go like, all right. I would have, and I would just been relaxed and I would have woke up relaxed and I would just be like, you know what? You're right. I should do better. I'll be better. I'll be a better man. So the first one, I don't know about the second one, but the first one for sure.
How are you, Anwar? I'm still shaking the cobwebs. You're gonna have to. It's gonna take me a little bit of time to warm up today. I'm still warming up. I don't really drink coffee, but today might be a day I could have used some. But by the time we get give me 10 minutes. By the top of the 9 o'clock hour, I'll be in regular form, but right now I'm going to need you to bus drive a little bit.
Well, I will tell you this. Yeah, well, Catch, I'm in a good mood. Like someone said, like Uncle's having the time of his life at OB right now. I'm in a good mood. Like I'm going to be honest with you. I've covered bad teams slightly good teams or good teams. I haven't covered, I don't know what I would call this team yet. But I haven't covered a team like this so far. So I'm in a good mood. It makes coming into work a lot easier. It makes interactions a lot easier. So
it makes doing 5 shows a day for 3 hours a day.
Yes.
A little bit easier.
Yeah, it makes everything easier. And so for me, Catch, there's not a lot for me left on the Baylor bone. That for me, I've kind of moved past. I'm kind of like present day where this team is at, and then of course to look ahead forward to Kansas, which it's crazy. It's you sometimes you have to reshape your thinking because it's still weird for me to say, man, Kansas is a big game. Like, woo, I don't know about this Kansas team. Like, I was like, did I say that? I'm like, oh yeah, I do have to say that because by the way, Kansas is good and Kansas is providing a good test. But right now, I'm kind of in the mode of, hey, Texas has a really good team. And I know you said, you know what, you're 10-3. No, 9-3 rather. You're kind of like, all right, you may have been wrong about that. I may be wrong about 10-2. Because right now, Catch, 10-2 can't be on the table for Texas going forward, right? Because I gave them a loss against Alabama and then give them 2 conference losses. So now 2 conference losses makes the conversation like a little bit different. It takes some of the, happiness out of there. But this team so far, Catch, I thought they'd be good, but they are exceeding my expectations.
I agree. And look, it's not the offense. The offense, I don't think has quite been as good as advertised. It's a good offense. It's a really good offense. But what is really elevating this team to the position that it's in right now is a defense that might be historically good when it's all said and done. Like, I don't know that we can they got to play a good quarterback first, and they'll see good quarterbacks in each of the next 2 games. And if they still have the statistical profile that they have today, where they are in the top 25 in 10 different major defensive categories, you name it, they're in it somewhere. I mean, I just can't say enough about what they're doing defensively. We thought that, look, going into this season, I think the thought process was nobody's going to be able to stop this Texas offense. It's going to be elite of the elite. They're going to average 40-plus points per game, and the defense will be along for the ride. Well, the offense is very good, but it's averaging like 35 points per game. And they haven't clicked on all cylinders in every game that they played. They did start a little slow against Rice. They did kind of, I don't even know what to call what the Wyoming performance was, but they didn't really get it done then. And even on Saturday, they weren't elite of the elite. But when you have as good of a defense as Texas has through the first 4 games of this season, and then you add a very good offense to that, you're left with a team that might be as complete from front to back as any in the country. If you look at Georgia, I don't think they're as good as Texas is on the offensive side of the ball. They're still trying to figure out, I think, at the quarterback position, who they are and what they're truly capable of. You look at a team like Michigan. I don't think Michigan's as good as Texas is on the offensive side of the ball. Both of those 2 teams, Michigan and Georgia, have really, really good defenses. And you would have thought going into the season that maybe Texas would take a back seat to those teams in those areas. But Texas has, I think, what looks to be a top 25 offense and a top 25 defense. It's really rare to pair those 2 things together. And I think it's one of the reasons why I'm really optimistic about this team moving forward. Great defense travels. If you're sketchy on offense, you can find yourself in a lot of 50-50 games in the fourth quarter. But when you're really, really good on defense, it gives you wiggle room. It doesn't put as much pressure on the offense, which I think is good for Quinn Ewers and really everybody on that offense. But you always point to the quarterback and say, he doesn't have to play as if the weight of the world is on his shoulders. And so it's a really complete team at this point. They're also better on special teams than I think people give them credit for. We're coming on the back end of the Baylor game where they muff a couple of punts. And so this week that will be the world is ending if they don't get that fixed, like drop passes were a week ago. But what did we see against Baylor? There wasn't a single drop pass. And so now nobody's going to talk about that. I think we'll eventually get beyond, lost in the muffs is that Xavier Worthy's second in the Big 12 right now in punt return average at 16 yards per return. I'll be honest with you. I'll take an occasional muff punt. And by occasional, I mean like once a season. If you're going to give me 16 yards a return, that is elite level stuff. Sanborn's been really good at punting, better than I thought it would be. The coverage units are really good. Like I said, from front to back, I think so far through the first month of the season, I haven't seen a team, with maybe the exception of Washington, that I think's playing better football than Texas is on the whole.
Well, that'll go to my overreaction as well, and I'll take it a step further. I think Texas is the best team in the country right now. Well, here's the deal, Catch. I'll be honest with you. I'm a former Pro Football Hall of Fame voter, and I take voting very seriously. I don't participate in preseason polls. Like that. I'll do polls. I don't do preseason teams because I don't know like how to fill out like an offensive line. What that would look like. I don't know what Kansas offensive line looks like or West Virginia's offensive line. So I don't do the teams because I take voting very seriously. It means a lot to me, and so. What frustrates me about where the polls are at is that they're going too much off of historic as opposed to current day. Because if they just judge it off the 2023 season, Texas should be number one based off the win against Alabama. Okay,
I don't think they're playing better football than Washington is, though. I would have Washington.
I'm talking about the guys who are ranked ahead of them, though.
Yeah, look. You're right about that.
Here's my thought. So Georgia's played UT Martin, Ball State, South Carolina, and UAB. Michigan has played East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, and Rutgers. And I look at Texas at least knocking off Alabama. If you go off of present day, just off of today's resume, then Texas should be ahead of those teams. That's what, as far as the AP ranking is concerned. I'm just going present day, but because of what Georgia did in the past, and because of what Michigan did in the past, then they're ranked higher. Now you can make a case for Washington, that's fine. Well, but I'm just going off of 2023 resume. I think Texas should be the number one team in the country.
I mean, I've got in my if I had a vote that counted section of my 10 thoughts from the weekend, I had Texas at 2. So it's not a big pushback. I think you're right about the teams that they're behind in the polls right now are teams that arrived in the season. You know, Georgia is the 2-time defending champions. So I don't really have too big of an issue with them remaining at number 1, but they haven't really played anybody yet. And I don't think their 2023 resume is as good as Texas's. That'll take care of itself, though. I mean, the good thing about a 4-team playoff, which will eventually expand to 12 teams, is we don't have to argue too strongly about these things. It's not too important. There's a lot of football left, and I think, you know, we saw it this weekend. Notre Dame drops out, and it could have very easily have been Ohio State that drops out of the top 10 or towards the back end of the top 10 with a loss. College football is a grind, man, and with 8 games to play, 2/3 of the season for almost everybody remaining, every week we'll see a pretender fall by the wayside. And I think, you know, look, I think if those teams were talking about Texas, I think they would turn around and say, well, they haven't played a legit quarterback yet. And, you know, I think Jalen Milroe is better than what a lot of people give credit for, but that will be answered over the course of the next 2 weeks. Jalen Milroe, you know, when it's all said and done, we may get to the halfway point of the season and we'll say, well, Texas played 3 of the top 25 rated quarterbacks in the country in Jalen Daniels, Jalen Milroe, and Dylan Gabriel. So the thing that people are saying today about, well, now we'll learn a little bit more about Texas because they're going to play a real quarterback. I think in a couple of weeks, we'll say, man, they've really played some good quarterbacks. Maybe not a great quarterback, but, you know, that would, in theory, eventually come. I mean, the truly great quarterbacks, I think, in college football right now, some of them play on the West Coast. Most of them, I think, play on the West Coast, although I think it's a deep year at the quarterback position. I was looking at the stats yesterday, and even a guy like Tyler Van Dyke, who's been exceptional for Miami, nobody really talks about him because you've got so much good quarterback play across the country right now. And Quinn Ewers is in that mix. And, you know, I think one of the things I'd have snapped your hand off for, Anwar, going into the season is you tell me 4 weeks in that Quinn Ewers hasn't turned the ball over once. My expectations would be that Texas would at least be 3-1, but maybe 4-0, that he's playing such careful football. And I don't mean that in like a negative way. Sometimes being a bus driver for a team that's ranked in the top 5 of the country, it's not a negative. I mean, you can get to the Heisman ceremony doing things like he did on Saturday, 18 of 23, not putting the ball in bad spots, not putting his team in positions that they've got to recover from. I've been really impressed by the way he's managed the games this season. And it's not an insult to say that a guy's emerged as a really good game manager, especially when you consider where he was a year ago. So if the next step for him is he's managing the game really good, then I think it provides a platform for him to even expand upon that. And, you know, there's a lot of things going really well for this team right now.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely starts and ends with Quinn. You know, that's because one of my thoughts was, you know, if we see Quinn, the Alabama Quinn and the Baylor Quinn, if that's the Quinn Ewers we see for the rest of the year, Texas doesn't lose a game. I mean, it's hard to lose a game. I don't see. There's no one in the Big 12 that would be able to. Hey, when you start off talking about where this defense is, and you have that going on from the offensive standpoint, Texas will be really, really hard to beat. Now, yes, the one thing I do agree with you on, it's kind of been one of my points too, is like the next 2 weeks we'll know, because Jalen Daniels will be a person that he's a guy that if something happens in the pocket, he can break it down and get out scramble. And now all of a sudden he can either run or he can throw it. I think Jalen Monroe, the jury's still out on him as far as what he's able to do. But I think if there was a draft that we had a college football fantasy draft and both of these quarterbacks were on there, I think you and I would be fighting over Daniels. And I'd be like, all right, well, I'll make Millwell work for my team, right? So we'll know a little bit more. We'll know a little bit more with Dylan Gabriel, who will be the second best of the guys that they faced so far for Oklahoma team that I don't know how good they are, but it's a rivalry game and weird things happen in rivalry games. And so we'll see that. But the next 2 weeks, starting with this weekend, that will be the one where I'm like, okay, this is where we're at. And this is where we'll know like where Texas is at. And Kai comes in, obviously, with a super chat. So I'll shut up. And good morning to you, Kai. He goes, with two ranked teams coming in the next 2 weeks, Kansas having Daniels and Oklahoma running an Art Briles offense. If Texas wins these 2 games, they won't have any real threats left in the regular season. This is a statement, but how about this? To make it more interesting, I'll put that as a buy or sell for you, Catch. So let's switch it around to a buy or sell question. If Texas gets by the next 2 weeks, you'd see any real threats left in the regular season?
Yeah, I do. I mean, okay. Kansas State is a good team. I'm not telling you that I think Kansas State is going to beat Texas. But if we're talking about games that will be threats, I think that Texas has 8 games left. I think 4 of them are threats. The 2 that are mentioned, Kansas State, and the TCU game later in the year on the road. I mean, that'll be a tricky road game. Again, not to say that I think TCU is going to win, but they'll be a threat. Chandler Morris, by the time they play that game, it remains to be seen what exactly TCU is going to be. But it will be a road game. I think that might be a primetime nationally televised game when it's all said and done. One of the things that we can't completely account for yet is that as the season goes along, the pressure in all of these games ratchets up significantly. I mean, there's a countless number of teams over the years that 8 weeks through the season are 8-0 and they look like they're going for it. And then they'll go on the road and play some unranked team and just all the stars are aligned. And the next thing you know, the team's fans base is rushing the field. It's like, what just happened? And, I think that Texas won't know what it's like to have to navigate that until they're in it. And even though they're third right now in one poll and fifth in another, the pressure won't really kick in until you hit November. And then you start getting the committee updating their list of the top teams and who would be in the playoff. And then there's constant national conversation about resumes and what happens if the team loses this weekend. And all these players, I think, are riding a little bit of a joyride right now. I mean, it's fun to play at Texas, but there will be a point later in the year, should they remain undefeated, where every week is really pressure-filled, and it will be a new chapter for this Texas team in terms of, as we look at what Steve Sarkisian is building, there gets to be a point where the expectations are you win impressively, and then the stakes are so high. And this program hasn't been there in a long, long time. I can tell you, man, I can remember when Texas played in 2009, the last time they went to the national championship game. Towards the end of the season, it stopped being fun. It just felt like only one thing was going to make it a really good season. Got to win the Big 12, got to get to the national championship game. Anything less is a massive disappointment. And the games almost stopped being fun, which is, in retrospect, a terrible thing to say, right? You should have enjoyed the last season Texas played for a national championship. I don't know how enjoyable that year was. It's because the pressure gets to be so extreme. And it will be one of the things by the time they play TCU late in the year, the pressure for Texas to win will be at levels the program hasn't seen in 14 years. And how they handle that is one of the things we can't quite know right now. We won't know until we see it. There's no reason to doubt this team, but history shows that the pressure gets to the best of teams all the time, and it will be something that Texas has to eventually navigate.
I mean, just go to Boulder, Colorado, catch right, and then ask Dion what pressure is like and what comes along with those high expectations for a team, right? Like you got people who are really gunning for you at that point,
and it never stops.
No,
it never turns off.
No, because it's Texas, but there's the extra added motivation. Yeah, Texas last go around the sun, like. It's a Big 12 nightmare if Texas is in the final hurrah holding up a Big 12 trophy saying, see you guys, we're going to the SEC. Like, Yormark doesn't want that. If you're a member school, you don't want that. So you're right, Catch. There will be expectations. Like if they get past the next two games, I think that's when it starts. Like, I think if they get past Kansas, if they get past OU, then I think they go into a bye and they come out of that with, okay, you only got 6 left. You got to get 6 more to the finish line. Then, of course, get past the Big 12 championship game. But even then, you can tell yourself, well, TCU was able to sneak in with a loss as long as it's a good quality loss. So, I told you the petty side for me obviously is that one Texas and OU in the Big 12 championship game, just so Yormark just has to sit there and be salty the whole time. But you're right, expectations, like it's all fun right now. It's all fun and being able to do those things. But he even Sark, going into the Wyoming thing, he said he thought those guys were focused. They said, I don't think they was as when it was all said and done, right? He thought it could have been a little bit better. He liked more of the focus going into this week. But, there's a difference when all of a sudden, it's everyone who goes into every single game talking about, to your point, catch you and I on Sundays, our focus has always been, let's get our columns done. It hasn't necessarily been, let's go and see what, what's the votes going to look like. Like that's a new world. And that's not now all of a sudden a world that they're going to be in and they're living in. And now how does the staff make sure those guys are dialed in? That will be, of course, I think a real key component going on. A really good observation by yourself.
Yeah, look, we're in uncharted territory for this group of players, this group of coaches. Sarkisian's never been here. I know he's coached at USC. I know he's coached at Alabama. It's a different deal when it's your team and you have to focus on everything. So from week to week, like this will be a team. I think the important thing is just as best you can, don't look too far down the road. Now, fans and media, we can do whatever we want to. We don't impact what happens on the field. But the best thing that this team can do is be focused on Kansas. Because I will say this, if Texas shows up and gives a Wyoming performance against Kansas, Kansas will push them into the fourth quarter and be more dangerous. Jalen Daniels is, I think, the best player that Texas will play against the rest of the season. And Kansas doesn't have all of the pieces the way that a Texas does. But at the quarterback position, Daniels is, for me, by far and away, the scariest player left on the schedule. And we saw what he could do 2 years ago when he came to town. Like, if he gets a hot hand, he can put a lot of pressure on the opponent. Now, Texas could win this game by 35. Like, they are better player for player across, a 22-man starting lineup. There aren't many times where you take a Kansas player over a Texas player. But at the quarterback position, the most important position in college football, they got a dude that will walk in on Saturday believing that he can do it and that he will do it. And the last thing that you want to do is give that guy any momentum early in the game. I think it will be important for Texas to start fast because you can put Kansas away early. If you play a really good first quarter, it's 14-0. Like, not to say that Kansas would be done, but I think one of the things that teams will find themselves faced with against Texas all year long is that you don't want to let Texas get 2 scores up on you, because you always feel like the Texas offense has more points in it. And it happened to Baylor real early in the game. It's like, crap, you're down 2 scores and Texas isn't done yet. And so how many points are you going to have to score? And it's like, oh man, there's 3 quarters to go and we're going to have to score 40 and we got none. And I think, you can take a team's will and spirit from them in college football pretty quickly if you dominate games early. We haven't seen that from Texas every week, but we saw it Saturday against Baylor. What I loved about that game is that Texas came in and played to its standard. And its standard right now is they're the number 3 ranked team in the country. And far too often we've seen them go into games in places like Waco, and they end up in a 60-minute brawl with a team that they've let hang around, and maybe you've turned the ball over. And Texas even did that a couple of times on Saturday. In an alternative universe where Texas wasn't playing well on offense and defense, those muffs on special teams would have been a big deal. Instead, it was like, okay, defense, go out there and limit them to a field goal. Don't let them in the end zone. That's exactly what happened. But I love that Texas ended that game early. And the best way to put yourself into a position to compete for a national championship, there's 8 games left. Make anywhere between 4 and 6 of those games over by halftime. There are going to be a couple of games we know they're going to be hairy at some point. Like it happens to all teams. Look at Florida State. They dump trucked LSU in the opener, and in 2 of their last 3 games, they've been pushed to the very limit. Boston College pushes them to the very limit. Clemson takes them to overtime, probably should win that game, and Florida State pulls a Houdini act, still does it. I mean, Texas will have those moments, probably a couple of them, before the season is over. Who knows? Maybe even in the next 2 weeks. But I love the fact that taking care of business means making bad teams look like bad teams. Half of the games on the schedule that will play are against teams they should bury. And their ability to go out and bury those teams early and end games before anyone can have delusions of grandeur, I think is what really, really good teams do. Georgia does it. It's what they kind of specialize in. I think, look at TCU a year ago. They got there. Mm-hmm. Boy, they had some Houdini acts. They had some plays where the win probability was at 2%, and they complete some plays and kick some field goals and sneak out a dodge. I think the Baylor game a year ago was one like that. So, I think we can appreciate that there's a roller coaster coming, but the less big hills and dips and loop-de-loops, the better.
Yeah, and then as it relates to Kansas, in the conversation that we have, I mean, Catch, for whatever it's worth, Kansas, from a total defensive standpoint, they're ranked 2nd in the Big 12 right now. Texas is 3rd. Okay, from a total offense standpoint, Kansas is ranked 6th in the Big 12. Texas is ranked 7th. So, and it comes in tackles for loss. Kansas has 35 tackles for loss, which ranks 8th in the nation. Okay, so they've got a good little team. They're good on offense. They're good on, but they're also a little good on defense. I mean, now look, when it comes to sacks, now Texas is killing them. Kansas got 60. Sacks. Texas got 84. Texas is, I mean, that can't be right. Is that 84? No, that can't be right. That has to be something wrong. I must have seen that right. Incorrect. I got to go back and look at that. Hold on 1 second. Let me look at sacks because that doesn't make any sense. Oh, sack yards. Golly, I was like 84. I said it looks to. Texas has 13 sacks this season. Kansas has 11 sacks this season. I'm sorry for that. So from a sack standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, that they're not bad. They're not. Again, even if we're grading on a curve because it's Kansas, nonetheless, you got to say to yourself, not a bad little team. So Texas will have its work cut out for itself this weekend. This will not be an easy one. This not be a layup by any stretch of the imagination. And by the way, and Sark pointed this out. Kind of, I think it was after the game, but this is a Kansas team that you're going to have guys who came in here 2 years ago and had a victory. So they're going to feel like Jalen Daniels isn't going to feel like this moment is too big, or how do I hang against these guys? They're going to say, I can do that. I can definitely do that. I can definitely hang against this team, this program. Kansas has been, it's kind of one of the things I wrote about. It's been this pesky nemesis of Texas for the past few years, where you've just looked at it and be like, man, again. And so, yeah, your point, like talent for talent, yes, Texas is better, if you're lining it up. And we also know when it comes for whatever reason in this game, Catch, that hasn't always mattered. That hasn't always made a difference when it's all said and done, is when you look at the victories that Kansas has had. So, yeah, this becomes, I think, every week will start to become kind of the biggest game of the season. But this one is the one you circle on your calendar with a 4-0 team that's ranked, that's got a good little defense that's coming in, that's got a quarterback in the stretch plays. It's good. This one ends up being a tough one.
I think the best thing for Texas is that Kansas will have their attention from last week. I watched, BYU goes into Lawrence last week, and they go into Fayetteville, and they beat Arkansas 2 weeks ago. And Arkansas is not terrible. I mean, that's somebody calling me. Sorry about that.
You know what I say, Catch? I have friends who texted me in the show, and I'm like, how do you not know what I'm doing right now? And why are you just not watching? Like, how? Now I'm mad at you. Like, now I'm mad. Now the meme's not even funny. Because I'm like, I do a show from 8 to 11. You're sending me a meme. Like, so you're not even watching my show?
I don't give a fuck.
They don't.
Who was it? Someone called me last week. Oh, Travis called me. So Travis Gailey, who just finished Get Your Horns Up earlier on Orange Bloods Live, he called me, and it was like, Travis Gailey pops up and like announces itself. And I'm like, wait a minute. He knows that I do a show. It's one step away from you calling me. No, people get it. Like, people just forget. They don't care.
No, called me 30 minutes before the game. Hey man, what are you doing? I'm in the press box. What's going on? Oh man, I got tickets to the game. I'm out. Yeah, I'm out here, man. What do you think? What do you think about the game? I'm like, dude, I am at work now.
2 weeks ago, my wife on a Sunday afternoon was like, "You think you can take the kids to a movie today?" You've been with me since 2005. You know that like Sundays are like my busiest day of the year. We're literally in the football season. Do you think I've got time to like take a few hours out of the day? Okay. Like, yeah. So
I understand, Catch.
And my kids don't even know what I do. I don't think. Like, they're 9. They don't have any grasp. It's weird. I feel very alone sometimes. It's like nobody knows like what I actually do for a living.
Outside of being on YouTube, they have no clue what I do.
Oh, and then my son comes in yesterday.
Oh, jeez.
Hendrix walks into my office and goes, "Hey, Dad, did you know that the person from the Woodlands that has the highest YouTube subscriber count, they have 15 million subscribers. They're number 1.
Well, thanks. Thanks.
Well, let them go buy you some Pokemon cards next weekend. Anyway, back to the point that I was making before someone with a 713 area code so rudely interrupted us. BYU, I thought, okay, maybe BYU is going to be one of the toughest games left on the Texas schedule. They just beat Arkansas, and I think, for everybody else on the planet, Arkansas might not feel like that big of a deal. But for Texas fans who 2 years ago saw what Arkansas can do in Fayetteville when they have it turned on, it was impressive that BYU went in there. And I thought Kansas, in watching that game, I thought they handled BYU, I don't want to say relatively easy, because it was a close game, certainly for a half, but it always felt like Kansas was in control. It always felt like Kansas could have run the ball on BYU anytime they wanted to. I think the sneaky thing about Kansas is that we're going to talk about Jalen Daniels all week long, rightfully so. Like I said, I think he's the best player that Texas will face the rest of the season. But Kansas got good skill position guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they can run the ball. And if there's any team on the schedule that might be able to force Texas, and Texas fans know BYU typically can run the ball. I think they finished with 9 yards rushing against Kansas. Like Kansas did maybe the most complete game against a decent team I've seen Kansas have in this new era of Kansas football. They're coached really well. They've got potentially great quarterback play. I think a lot of Texas fans will look back at last year and say, well, we handled them in Lawrence pretty easily. And yes, Texas did. And that could happen on Saturday. Like I don't dismiss the idea that Texas could win this thing 55-20, 55-17, something like that. They could just blow the doors off of Kansas. But Kansas has good skill players. They can run the ball. They can stop the run. I mean, they're more than just a Jalen Daniels-led team. And I think for all the conversation about how good Daniels is, I'm most impressed so far this year with what I've seen from Kansas. And they're a little bit more complete of a team than they would have been the last couple of years when it felt like, hey, if Daniels comes in here and turns into Michael Vick, you've got a chance. I don't even know that they necessarily need that. I mean, it would help for Kansas in terms of their chances of winning a game if he channels the best version of himself. But a year ago, he was coming off of injury. There was not any rhythm. Texas got Daniels at the perfect time. And they did that thing that they did against Baylor, which is they got up big early and took the belief away from Kansas early. I think the thing that, I don't want to say worries you, but, would it shock anybody if we're in the middle of the third quarter on Saturday and it's a one-score game? Texas has played its best football on the road.
Yeah.
When will we see Texas look like a top 5 team at home? I would not have guessed before the season started that would be one of the questions I would be asking myself 4 weeks in. But it's now time for them to do at DKR what they've been able to do away from home. And if they can, they'll beat Kansas comfortably. If they play a Wyoming or Rice level of football on Saturday, we might be looking at a fourth quarter game.
I mean, I'm expecting a fourth quarter game, to be quite honest with you, Catch. I don't view it, styles make fights sometimes in boxing, and like this style of, like we'll say, like a running quarterback who can also throw the ball will make for an interesting fight. I mean, there were times where Jalen Monroe did have success throwing the ball down the field, Catch. So, I mean, his at times while Texas was able to get the ball to him, get the ball at him or gets him. I mean, he's not inept. They made him look bad, but Jalen Monroe's not inept. But Jalen Daniels is not inept either. He will present some of the problems that Monroe that had, for Texas. And your point is can you get to him consistently to make sure that thing isn't a thing? But I'm expecting that Kansas will be giving Texas all that it can handle when it's all said and done. Now, of course, if you get a Baylor outcome, like, sure, you'll take that, 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. But they do have a decent little defense. They do actually have a good little offense as well. They won't be a pushover by any stretch, and I'm expecting it to be a fourth quarter game. I expect that this will come down to the team that doesn't make the mistakes. This will come down to Tavondre and Byron Murphy getting that constant pressure on him up front, and then Texas find a way to pull it out. I mean, I know Texas has got the skill position, but it's one of those things that we saw Rice, then we saw Alabama, then we saw Wyoming, and then we saw gosh, I went out of order there, Catch, but we saw Rice, Alabama,
Wyoming,
and then we saw Baylor, and so it's really like, all right, will the real Texas team please stand up, right? Will that be the consistent one? Because you don't want to see the Rice performance again, and you definitely don't want to see the Wyoming performance again.
I think, what's interesting, though, The real Texas team has the best quarterback play that Texas has had in 14 years. It has one of the top 3 wide receivers in the history of the school in Xavier Worthy. And if we're looking at production through the first 2 years and 4 games, you'd have to rank him number 1.
Yeah.
They've got, I think, the guy that's going to eventually be remembered as the best tight end in the history of the school. I wrote about this, my 10 thoughts from the weekend. Jatavion Sanders is on pace to break both career receptions and career receiving yards by a tight end before the end of this season is complete. He's only been playing. He's played it 1 season and 4 games. That's all he's played. Like, he didn't do a whole lot as a true freshman. I mean, we all asked the questions. And by the way, I would go back and argue that on a 5-7 team, they probably should have found a way to get him on the field a little. If you're going, like, you can't tell me that they could not have used Jatavion Sanders, no matter how inconsistent he might have been as a true freshman. Best tight end in school history when it's all said and done. I've seen them all. There's not one I would take over Jatavion Sanders. You could argue that we're looking at maybe the best left tackle that Texas has had in certainly the last 20 years. I think they've got the best linebacker in the last 20 years. And I wrote about this weekend. Only 2 linebackers in the history of the school have ever been All-American 2 years in a row. Tommy Nobis and Derek Johnson. Those guys get talked about like they're gods.
Yes.
And Jalen Ford is in a position to, like, finish with back-to-back All-America seasons. He's got to make a first-team All-American team, which those 2 guys did in back-to-back seasons. It's why they get treated like gods. But in the last 35, 40 years, I don't know that there's been any, other than Derek Johnson, I don't know that there's ever been a linebacker at Texas better than what we're seeing from Jalen Ford right now. He's created a turnover in 8 out of 11 games. That's what you want. When people start talking about all of the players on defense and this guy's good, Jahdae Barron's a great example. People want to talk about him like he's great. And it's like, no, man, great is what Jalen Ford is doing. Make a big-time difference-making play every week. That's what Earl Thomas did. That's what guys like Michael Huff did. That's what Jalen Ford is doing. But it's not insignificant that we're talking about 5 or 6 guys on this team that are in the all-time greatest discussion on some level, whether it's 15, 20, 30, 40 years, somewhere along the line. Texas has a handful of guys that are in those discussions at their positions. It helps to have those kind of players. You know who had that kind of – the 2005 national championship team had that. You could look all across the board. It wasn't just Vince Young. They had guys that you would look at and go, well, that's the best such and such that we've had in X amount of years. This team has that. For the first time, it really crossed my mind. Next year's team, I don't mean to get negative, Anwar, but next year's team's going to lose a lot. They're potentially going to lose. I think this team could have 11 or 12 guys drafted when it's all said and done. And that's not hyperbole. I mean, let me count them out real quick. Ewers, Worthy. I think Mitchell's going to want to go pro, but I wonder if he's going to have this season in a deep wide receiver class to do it. But let's count him because we know he has an urge to go to the NFL. Sanders is 4. Christian Jones is 5. Devondre Sweat is 6. Alfred Collins is 7. Jalen Ford is 8. By the way, I have not included a guy like Byron Murphy who could go pro when the season's over with based on the level of play that he's had right now. Ryan Watts is 9. I think Jaron Thompson gets drafted. That makes 10. I feel like I'm forgetting somebody, but I haven't talked about Jordan Whittington, who I don't know if he gets drafted, but like I'm not inflating my numbers and getting to 10 or 11 or 12. This is a team that's going to lose a lot of players. I don't know that we'll truly appreciate how good and talented this team is until it's no longer playing and we get a season removed, and maybe Texas is a little bit in rebuilding mode. And oh, by the way, next year's schedule is really difficult. But this team is the most talented team that Texas has had since 2005.
Sorrell is who they said in the chat.
And I'm not even including Sorrell because I don't think he's playing at a level right now that would allow him to be drafted. You know, if Sorrell, I think, came into the year thinking if he gets it to be an 8, 9, 10 sack guy, that he might turn pro and go early, but he's not having that kind of a year. He's got 8 games left. So if he gets on a run, he can certainly put himself into a position to be that kind of a player. But right now, he's not playing like a guy who's playing so well that he'll be able to leave pro and be a second day guy. I mean, you know, on some level, you can make NIL money at Texas and come back for another year. You know, if you're a day 3 guy, you might as well stay at Texas and make $750,000 in NIL money and try to elevate your draft position.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You can't argue against any of those guys, you know, that you've mentioned. So it is a lot. It is talent.
Oh, Jahdae Barron is number 11. I left him out.
Barron? Okay. So I put Barron on the list as well. Yeah, Jahdae for sure. He's playing on a high level.
But that doesn't include Catalon, Whittington. I mean, Keelan Robinson's not going to be a drafted player. I don't care how fast he runs. Although maybe if he ran like a 4.3, he could sneak in. But that guy's getting like 1 carry a game. Again, I'm not inflating my numbers to get to that number. I suppose there's a world where Texas could have 13, 14, 15 if they were to play in the playoff and play, you know, maybe for a national championship.
I got one. I won't put Robinson on the list. I'm not going to put Whittington on the list. I got a sneaky one, Ryan Sanborn. That's my sneaky one. I'm going to put him late. He's averaging 47 yards a punt right now, Catch. He is flipping the field.
Yeah, it's still 4th in the Big 12, though. Like, the thing is, it's really hard for – I think Sanborn can play in the NFL.
Yeah.
But being drafted as a punter, you know, those usually it's a unique situation. But you know what? I won't completely dismiss it. It could happen. I think he'd be certainly on the fringe list right now. I think Texas has legitimately 11 guys that could be drafted next year, and that doesn't include a half dozen fringe guys. Again, I put Jalen Catalon in a fringe position. I don't think he's played well enough this year for me to definitely say he's a pro. He's got injury issues. Like, you know, there are, but could he sneak if he continues to, let's say he plays his best brand of football in the final half of the season, could he sneak into being drafted? Absolutely. But I'm not counting him. I guess this could be one of the most, this season could end in the amount of players drafted off of this team could be the highest since 1983 for certain. And that's only 40 years ago. That's it. Just 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. By the way, Blake Bryan says punters don't get drafted. 4 of them were selected in last year's 2022 draft. So punters do get drafted, Blake. So there is if 4 got selected last year, then you put them in the potential mix. I'm just putting in. It's a sneaky one. I'm not saying, my God, this is not a Michael Dixon prediction. I'm just like, I'm just saying, like, hey, 7th round. We need somebody who can flip the field. Hey, why don't we go ahead and take this? Like, you just never know. I'm just going to put that out there. Because we got like 10 minutes left. You want to talk Brandon Baker by any chance?
Sure. He commits last night. He's a fringe 5-star guy. Technically only 24/7 has him ranked as a 5-star player. But he is kind of he's ranked inside the top 50 by every major national recruiting service. I think he's behind Colin Simmons. He's the 2nd most important recruit in this class. He's the 2nd highest rated guy in this class. that he's at Modern Day High School. I think the Longhorns in the next 2 or 3 years are about to become, they're going to start cleaning up at Modern Day. And it is one of those programs like IMG that, yeah, it matters to have your flag planted at that school. It's not the only reason why Chris Jackson was hired as the wide receivers coach. I mean, that guy has a resume that, you know, he can coach at a school like Texas, no problem. But that he went to high school at Modern Day certainly, I think, was one of the things that probably helped push that over the top. They're bringing in another nationally rated offensive lineman from Modern Day this weekend, who is their left tackle, whereas Brandon Baker plays on the right side. There's just a lot about this particular commitment that there are reasons why it matters a lot. The least of which isn't, you know, I think Kyle Flood wants to have at least one super blue chip offensive lineman in every class. And he got 2 in that vaunted 2022 recruiting class. As much as last year's offensive line class was nice, and as much as I want to say the 2 offensive linemen that they have committed in this year's class before the commitment of Baker are nice, none of those guys are on like super blue chip territory. So it had been almost 2 years since Texas had been able to pull one of those guys. I think it was really critical for Kyle Flood to get another one of those guys, just to constantly reinforce the idea that this is where big time guys go. This is where not only do big time guys go, but they develop and they go to the NFL. And a guy like Kelvin Banks right now is a showcase piece for Kyle Flood, because he'll say, look, he came in and started day one. If you're good, we'll play you. And he's gotten better, and he's faced all these NFL guys like Will Anderson, and like he holds his own. He's going to be a top 5, top 10 draft pick. That's what I can do for you. And so I think it was interesting that Brandon Baker mentioned that last night, that, hey, Texas develops their offensive linemen. I almost fainted.
Yeah.
Texas is the place where offensive linemen go to get developed. Oh, imagine telling yourself that 2 years ago, when anybody getting drafted was like a reason for holding a parade. And now we're at this point where big time guys are looking at results and saying, why did I pick Texas? Why wouldn't I pick Texas? Now, look, I think the thing that pushed Texas over the top with Brandon Baker was NIL. He was maybe the most honest prospect in the country this year in terms of admitting, yeah, man, NIL matters.
Yeah.
NIL and what I can do for myself and what I can do for my family and for the next 2 or 3 years or however many years I'm playing college football, like, yes, it matters. And I think Texas's NIL edge meant that regardless of what Baker said last night about, I didn't even know what I was going to do until last night. I woke up and called. No, they knew. Texas knew. He may have called the coaches and officially said, I'm committed. They knew. And the party that he'd been putting together, I was told by somebody on the Texas side of things, that took weeks of preparation. That wasn't like they just put that together this weekend. Yeah. There are a lot of boxes that Texas checked, but you know what? If you're a Texas fan, don't be upset if someone says that a kid picked Texas because of it. It used to be Texas fans get all in their feelings on War about, no, he didn't come here because of NIL. He came here because he had that love of burnt orange in his heart, and he's been dreaming of being a Longhorn his entire life, and like, there's this romanticized notion of like why kids come to Texas. Texas fans need to be completely okay and down with the idea that their big ass wallet is a big reason why kids are picking Texas. Because if they weren't, you'd be bitching about it. You'd be like, why is our NIL program not stronger? Why is Nebraska? Why did Brandon Baker go to Nebraska instead of Texas? Why aren't we ahead? Texas is ahead on the NIL front.
Catch, you don't see a rich guy on a yacht who is, like who you're like, what? And he's got like 10 women who are all dime pieces. You don't see him complaining. I know they're here because I'm rich. I know these women are only here. All these attractive women are only here because I've got a lot of money. He goes, I know why you're here. And it's great. He's living his best life, right? That's how it goes.
And look, it helps that Texas has like 4 or 5 reasons, right? Kyle Flood, development of the offensive lineman, Austin, the education, Sarkeesian. There are other reasons, but this kid specifically admitted, yeah, man, NIL, it's going to be a big part of why I go wherever I go. Texas had this kid wrapped up 2 months ago. Why? Because and he lives in California. So, he has an agent. Like, they can negotiate right now. It's different state rules in California. And like Texas was like, let's play ball. Their NIL people have put a potential plan once he arrives on campus in front of him that caught his eye in a big, big way. And the thing that Texas has proven, which schools like USC and a few other schools around the country, even A&M has had a couple of people show up and go, hey, this isn't what we talked about. This is not, from an NIL perspective, what I was expecting. Texas very quickly has developed a reputation as a school that delivers on their promises. And we remember you and I covering that Jordan Addison deal from a year ago where USC did not do that with Jordan Addison. And there were people even at the back end of last year who were like, Jordan should have went to Texas.
Yes.
He would have gone to Texas. He would have made more money. He'd have been coached and developed just as well. And in the end, we kind of got screwed. Texas has a reputation of not screwing people. And it's really early, right? But in just a couple of years, to have developed a reputation of delivering on what is expected is a real big thing. It's not insignificant that Kelvin Banks is doing commercials right now with Mattress Mac.
It's kind of big. It's kind of a
Mattress
BFT.
Mac.
Yeah.
That's Kelvin Banks's like guy. Yeah. And Can I get me some Mattress Mac? I'd love for Mattress Mac to be my guy. They took Mattress Mac, got him involved in NIL, and like his guy is Kelvin Banks. And those things are noticed. I know we've got some super chats. So
we got some super chats, and I need to get out within 5 minutes. So let's see. Catch. As the president of the Jay Brooks fan club, I appreciate your application to join. Did you apply?
I did not. He says he's accepted. I do not jump late on players' bandwagons. And I, I'm in enough bandwagons. I'm in enough fan clubs. You guys enjoy your Jonathan Brooks fan club. I got enough responsibilities in other fan clubs. You might have got someone else's. There's more people than me that spelled Jeff with a G. Maybe that was somebody else.
Okay. Jay Lee puts it out there. He says, speaking of JT, looking back now, is there any good reason he couldn't have played both ways a little bit like T. Hunter? Edge 2 years ago wasn't so good. What do you think?
I think he needed a lot of development at edge if he was going to play there. And it's probably too much. You can play wide receiver and corner, and a lot of that's just about raw athleticism. I don't want to dismiss what Travis Hunter is doing because he's elite of the elite. But to ask a guy to be an edge and a tight end and expect him to be at national levels, I think that's a lot to ask for. In the end, Jatavion's right. Jatavion wanted to play tight end.
He did.
He's going to end up playing, if he stays healthy, in the NFL for a long, long time at that position. We need to just respect the fact that that's what he wanted to do, and his performance, and he's going to end up being the best tight end in school history. He chose wisely.
And to be able to pick a niche position like that, like you said, you play a long time. It's like being a long snapper in the NFL, right? Like those guys play for like 10, 12. You never know their names, but those guys play in the tight ends. Because we do fantasy drafts every year there's guys that I swear were on teams 10 years ago that are still available on the waiver wire as a tight end. Like,
by the way, I might not win my fantasy matchup this weekend because I'm playing a team that's scoring a bunch of points, but
not against me. You're killing me right now.
But my decision to put Devon Achane in the lineup yesterday is like the best fantasy decision I've ever made. In the 30 years I've been playing fantasy football, putting Achane in my lineup yesterday may be the single smartest move I've ever made.
Dustin is kicking my butt. I'm sorry. I thought it was you. I apologize. Yes, it is good. All right, let's do it. Let's knock out a couple of more so I can get downtown. Is that it, Aaron, or we're done? Sherman.
See, now he needs to be talking smack to you because Tottenham came in and held Arsenal to a draw yesterday.
Was not good.
Hey,
did not love it.
Careful about what you're wishing for now.
Did not love it.
I do not know that this is the Liverpool team that you want to be talking smack about. Mikel Antonio found out the hard way this weekend. I love my Liverpool team right now. They are playing really, really good footy. And bring it on, Tottenham. You're next in line. You can get some too.
Someone paying and putting money in to talk smack about Premier League, I will have to say that's a first. I do
like Tottenham's manager, by the way. That guy's awesome. So don't think I don't respect him or Tottenham, but I'm just letting you know right now, this Liverpool team's a little something, something.
All right, Catch, final thought before I bounce and we got Sark at 11.
What's the headline today in the press conference? Like, what's the big deal? What's the talking point?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, is it anything other than Jalen Daniels? I mean, at this point, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's things to ask him, right? There's tons of good questions to ask about this team and where they're at in the defense, but it's got to be a Jalen Daniels question, isn't it?
There's no injury questions.
There are no injuries, so he doesn't have to worry about that. And
I've got a question that you could maybe kick around.
Think about it.
A week ago, he talked about CJ Baxter in the same Monday press conference in terms of being the lead back for this team. How much has the lead back idea inside Sarkisian's head changed based on what Jonathan Brooks has done each of the last 2 weeks? Because he's getting carries last week at 3-to-1 ratio over Baxter. I mean, just what has Jonathan Brooks done in Sarkisian's estimation? Is he the lead back? Is his expectations that Baxter will eventually cut into that? I'm fascinated because Brooks has been so good. It's hard to imagine that certainly in the next couple of weeks that anything will change.
It's a good one. I mean, I think we'll see happy Sarkisian today. Like, I don't think we'll have to worry about any question that is asked by somebody. I don't think they're going to have to walk on eggshells. Like, I think I'm safe. Chip Brown's safe. Like, I think everybody's safe. You know, it's like, Facebook, you have to mark yourself as safe. You got to mark yourself as safe after a Sarkisian press conference. I think everybody will be able to mark themselves as safe because I think it'll be a pretty good move.
All right, my man, get out of here.
I got to go downtown.
Rogueshop.com, guys. Get high, get feeling well. Use that promo code OrangeBloods. Let them make your life better. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, don't forget the Catch will be back. Catch will be back at noon. House Divided. Him and Chad Hastings. Do not miss that. 12-3. Alex got Football with Friends from 3:30 to 5:30. And then, of course, we got the OB Outsiders tonight at 9 o'clock with all those guys. It's a party time there. Those guys should be having a hell of a time. So, all right, for Jeff Ketchum, for Aaron, who does an amazing job producing behind the scenes, for everybody else at OB, and for those who even had someone sign up last week, Catch, because they got excited about the things I was saying and no promo needed, decided they were going to join OB. So I appreciate it. And today's always a good day to join OB. I'm just going to throw that out there. Time for me to do some work. Remember what I was saying? Live each day like it was your last. One day it will be. We'll talk soon. Take care.